Hello, I want to make a short video on farming practices. I think they should be more humane, but I also think you have to be practical. For example, we used to have breeds of cattle, cows, that used to produce some degree of meat as well as milk. It was found that it was more commercially profitable to specialise in particular directions. So if you wanted to produce milk, you wanted to produce cows that produced a hell of a lot of milk all the time. This has going to cause a lot of actual suffering to cows now, which apparently have udders so large they're just uncomfortable just by their very existence, even if they're properly milked. In fact, they're so productive you can't milk them enough times during the day for the size of herds they have. The cows can't be milked enough, so they're in pain because they're just made to be that productive. It also uses up their bodies so fast, takes so much out of them, that they die apparently 4 years old. 4 years old for a cow is not normal. A big animal usually has a longer life. You know, elephants live for 60 years or more. Cattle, I think, used to live for about, 10 years or 8 years, 10 years, not. So now they're literally dying halfway through their life cycle, which if you think people used to die and still do die around 65 years of age, is like people dying at 32 and a half years of age. It's just not normal, and we'd think it was terrible if it happened to us. It's like in that film Blade Runner, where people are engineered to die at around 30. Everyone knows it's wrong. And it's like in that film Logan's Run, where people are killed at 30. It's wrong. So why is it okay to treat animals like that? You know, we should have some sort of consideration towards them. As I say, in the old days, animals used to not be so specialised. They hadn't been outbred so crazily. Another example would be the Belgian cow, which literally has double the body mass of a normal animal, doesn't move normally, and looks miserable to me. Every single one of them looks miserable to me. You can see them in that program, Farmageddon. I think it's called Farmageddon. And it shows a lot of the way that farm animals are treated by people. And some of them have literally, the Belgian cow has literally double its body mass, looks totally abnormal. These people who breed them are proud of them, the way breeders are proud of producing abnormal, miserable animals. Animals that certainly suffer whether or not they're encouraged to appear happy or not. And these Belgian cows all look miserable. It's horrible. Because they can't move naturally because they're overbuilt. And it's just horrible to see them trying to move. They're also not allowed to move anyway. I think the owners are frightened of them because they're so strong. So they're actually kept in stalls their entire lives. So, they never get out at all. They're barely allowed to move anyway. So they pretty much stand still for their entire lives, which is horrific. I think they're going to be trying to make veal out of them as well as making them have a lot of muscle mass, because they don't let them move, really. And the poor animals just literally exist like objects almost, really, until they're slaughtered. It's horrible. We should go back to having animals which are productive enough to be productive, to make money for farmers, but which also allow, for example, calves to have some lives with their mothers. Apparently, they're literally slaughtered immediately after birth these days in many instances. Can you imagine being a cow that hasn't even had a chance to say hello to its baby, to nuzzle it, and sees it slaughtered in front of them, maybe before the umbilical cord's even detached? God knows how how an animal feels after that. And to be milked after that, because they're made to have calves to bring them into milk. And to be made to produce milk after that must be horrific. I mean, several times a day cows get milked now, I believe, at least in the morning and the evening, maybe more than that. And so repeatedly every day, because they're not stupid animals, they have some intelligence. To be reminded of what happened to their baby right in front of them, several times a day, it's just horrific. And if this has to be done every year to bring them into milk, then this would be, this horror would be refreshed every year. It's just horrific beyond words. It's not acceptable. So the thing to do is to refuse all produce coming into, for example, the UK, where I live, where, in this country, to refuse all produce that isn't UK made, because at least we've enforced some measure of humane behaviour here, of humanity here, and as a result, we can have just a little bit of assurance that this kind of thing might not happen. We should also ban all animals that have been bred beyond a certain point of acceptability. For example, we should ban dogs which have deformed teeth because their faces have been shortened so much. Pugs, for example, have deformed teeth because their faces have been shortened so much. That's just unacceptable. Those dogs should be put down. Breeders should be punished. I don't know why we even have people like that who are so cruel anyway. Maybe we shouldn't even have them. But we certainly shouldn't allow. We should just make a law that breeders have to take their dogs to a vet for a vet check. And if something is happening, like none of them are having normal teeth from a particular breeder because they're shortening their faces so much, then that breeder shouldn't be allowed to breed, and the dogs should be neutered so that they can't reproduce, because it just shouldn't be allowed. And the same with cats, Persian cats. Once they start having breathing problems or any kind of respiratory problem or anything like, and any illness related to abnormality, like the abnormal gait of the ragdoll cat, which can't even run normally and runs a bit sideways because of the length of its back. It's just horrible. Once you start getting any kind of abnormality in an animal, it shouldn't be allowed to be bred, and anyone who breeds it really should be punished and not allowed to breed animals anymore. Maybe not even be allowed to have animals anymore, because they obviously have an unsavoury attitude towards them, where they're prepared to cause them, problems, one kind or another. They just shouldn't be allowed to have them. It might not even be really fair to have dogs that don't shed their coats, because it's not very nice for them. It is, it gets matted. It's harder to find this in a thick woolly coat. It's harder to find fleas, for example. And if you say fleas can be treated with chemicals, well, the fact is that fleas are getting immune to those chemicals. And every time you try and find a new chemical, it involves testing it on animals in labs, which is not nice. Why should a lab animal suffer so you can have a pet? And these attitudes are horrible anyway. People who have attitudes like that shouldn't have animals. So, we should only breed animals that are not suffering because of us, whether it's pets that are being made to suffer or farm animals that are being made to suffer. There should be some sort of defined limit where animals don't get bred, beyond which animals are not bred. So, for example, cows should have to have udders that can be emptied of milk once or twice a day, properly emptied of it. Herds of animals should not be allowed which can't be milked enough humanely during the day. Animals should have a normal lifespan, should not be bred beyond their normal lifespan, so that if a cow lives naturally with humans in domestic circumstances to 8 years old or 10 years old, then they should still be living that long. And you may say, well, that will immediately lower the amount of milk that we get. Yes, it will, and it will raise milk prices, and everything will return to normal. People will go back to valuing milk normally and meat normally. At least we'll have everything humane again. And you may say, well, there's not enough farmland for all the demand that would be. More land would come back into use as farmland and not be developed. And we don't want development, do we? No, we don't. Why should the building trade have all the profit? Why should the builders who will object to this get to build over our green and pleasant land? We'd all rather see it as farmland. with hedgerows for wildlife to get round farmland on, and not have prairie farming. Apparently fields are getting bigger and bigger as well, and that's bad for wildlife. And we all need wildlife, apparently, to keep the whole world turning, to keep the whole world going. Otherwise, scientists say everything's going to die off. You know how we need bees. Everything's interrelated. We all need even the little insects. It's true, they plough the earth. Oh, even the underground insects, the worms, keep the soil usable. It's just amazing. Everything is interrelated. And we should be playing our part by not breeding animals beyond a certain point. We can bring more... so you may say, well, that will make less milk available. Yes, well, we can start farming more and building less over the green and pleasant land that we have. And leftists will now say that won't mean that we can take in refugees. Well, we can still help refugees. We don't have to have them here in our country to help them. You can help people overseas, you know. You don't have to help them you don't have to bring them all over to help them here. And as for meat production animals as well, they should not be bred beyond a certain point. They should not be bred to the point where they're uncomfortable. You know, so we should refuse all meat that comes from the Belgian cow, for example. That's horrific. They only keep the males, I believe. They don't keep the females so much because the females don't produce so much meat. So they'd be killing the females early off in life. They keep the bulls because they have the most meat, the biggest amount of meat. It's just horrific. It's really horrific. You should watch Farmageddon. It's awful. Really horrible. It's like a nightmare. You have to be prepared to watch like a horror film to watch that. It's just horrible. We should by law, if we protected our farming industry, then prices would rise because we wouldn't be able to get inhumane meat from overseas. If overseas meat could pass our tests, it could come here. But we shouldn't have it while most of these most appalling things are going on. You know, you may say, oh, we won't have enough meat then. Yes, we will. We can build more facilities here. They just have to be humane, that's all. They would become protected industries. So everyone would think, oh, good, I'll definitely get a fair price for my products. And that would increase wages and job opportunities as well. Because there'd be jobs here. Because we wouldn't be buying meat from overseas. We would be raising it ourselves here. So it would all work out again anyway. Why on earth we've done this horrible lot of stuff, I don't know. Maybe it's literally to force a situation where people would be turned against meat or something. 10% of meat production has been rejected by consumers in the past 10 years because people are going vegetarian or eating more vegetables precisely because they don't like this awful treatment of animals. You know, if this carries on, we're all going to be vegetarians. Whose agenda is this? Or maybe it's just the way some people treat animals, I guess. But we could eat more animals if we raised them in this country and simply didn't allow meat to come in from other countries. The protected status of the meat would raise the price, and people would have more interest in exploiting the situation by raising animals here, which would increase the number of jobs in the UK. You know, so it would all work out for everyone's benefit anyway. There's just, I don't know, it would just make so much sense, really. So yeah, we should go back. We still have some rare breeds available, you know. One simple quick cross would bring everything right back to a more humane status. You'd immediately get a more humane status. They say those animals from 10 years ago, when cows were still comfortable with their udders and not overproducing, are no longer available. They say they've been bred out of existence and we couldn't use them again anyway. Who are these people who have these horrible, cruel attitudes? Farmers. Not all farmers are bad. We shouldn't listen to these people who say these nonsensical things. Every farmer has to survive, and maybe they've all been driven to survive by overbreeding animals. But some farmers still try to be humane. They just have to survive too. They may well be very pleased to go back to animals of 10 years ago, if any exist, or to breed with an old breed, a rare breed from like 80 or 100 years ago or something. Because that would, if they're humane, because that would immediately make the animals an older type of animal that wasn't overbred. And that should be the law. We should just literally institute a law that if your animal can't be milked enough to keep it comfortable during the course of a day, then you have too many animals, or really you have an animal which has been bred to use itself up in 4 years and is suffering anyway, because so much is being dragged out of it every day. It's like somebody being overworked, that with the too much being taken out of the body. You can work someone to death, you know. You can force somebody under pain of death or something in a concentration camp or a gulag or whatever to literally just work and work and work until their body is exhausted and they just die, or they can't do any more. They literally can't. And then, you know, you just shoot them in the head. And you know that they will work to death because they literally couldn't do any more to save their lives. Or I believe there are people who have actually just struggled on and they just literally collapsed and died from being overworked. And that's what happens with these animals. More and more is taken out of them until they just can't give any more, and they just die, except that they just send them to slaughter while they've still got any strength to get there, you know, to be made to walk. It's unfair to the animal, really. So it would make perfectly good commercial sense to go back to older breeds of animal. Really, some people could be employed to farm them, and some people would just pay more because we'd be limiting, you know, where we got our food from. Now, and if you think that would raise prices unnaturally, well, you know, there's got to be a line you draw somewhere. Otherwise, we're not going to have animals anyway soon. They're literally they'll just die out. They will be made to produce and wear themselves out in just 3 years, and then 2 years, and I think it takes 2 years for them to even have a baby. So you'd be wearing them out. If you carry on, they'll become so overused. It will be like they'll be bred at 1 year or something insane like that, if that's possible. Humans will probably breed them that way, and then they'll wear themselves out in 2 years. They'll be worn out in 2 years. You know, and there'll be a point where you just won't be able to breed them into adulthood and exploit them that much anymore. Maybe that will be reached at 1 year, and at that point, really, you'll be breeding a baby, bringing it into maturity before it's even grown. That's what's being done with chickens at the moment. Their body weight their muscle mass is being grown beyond the ability of their legs to sustain them. That's why you're getting all these chickens with broken legs. You know, when you buy something and it's got broken legs, you wonder who broke those legs. Apparently, they're so weak. The bones are so weak. They're just breaking under the weight of their muscle mass. That's what's happening. We're breeding baby chickens that are so overgrown. These huge fat baby overgrown things. Their legs break under them. That's not normal. You know, do we want a normal life? Do we want normality, or do we want abnormality? We're choosing abnormality at the moment. If it goes on, the chickens will their legs will break before they even finish growing or something. You know, it's just sick, really, and we'll end up with animals forced into maturity when they're still babies, really, and if that happens with cattle, for example, their bones will start breaking under them. They won't be able to produce a calf because they won't even be able to stand up to get fed. The chickens won't be able to feed because they'll have broken bones. It's cruel, it's mentally ill, and it's going to come to a point where it's impractical anyway. It's just not going to happen anymore. You know, because the baby, they're going to be you know, they're going to be too sick to reproduce and to take the consequences of reproduction, really. Like, they're going to, I think they're going to be worn out before they produce their second calf anyway, which means they'll only be having one baby each. And so their population will crash and we'll have no more cows. So you're definitely going to do without your milk then and meat then. We need to find a way of treating animals that's sustainable, and it needs to be brought into law. Because if it's not enforced by law, then properly enforced by law, farmers will continue to compete with each other until our food, our animals, go out of existence due to farming competition. I say that farming should be under state control, and farmers should be limited in the amount of animals they can have and how much milk they can get from each animal every day. They could have their own herds, breed them as they wished, but they wouldn't be allowed to have more than a certain income each. Anyway, say, for example, they had 100 cows. They wouldn't be allowed to make more than, I'm just giving any figure here, they wouldn't be allowed to make more than X amount of money a day, say £100 a day or something. Because that way they would have no commercial interest in making them overproduce. It would just be excess milk they'd have to get rid of. Or they'd have to give it to charity, say. They'd have to give it to charity. And a charity could take it. And then you'd have to hope that charities wouldn't compete by giving them secret bribes or something to get hold of their excess. But, something has to be done. People say that's fascism when the government works with business. But at the same time, they're hypocrites, because in a socialist state, the government controls all the business anyway. They say that means it's not business anymore. It's still people controlling other people's lives. And rent controls are the government controlling businesses anyway. And they're very popular with tenants. They bring them in and out the whole time. And every time they bring them in, tenants love them, and then they just take them away again. But rent controls, when they're brought in by governments, are very popular with tenants. And then you get people saying, oh, populist things are terrible. Why are they terrible? Why is it terrible? It's not terrible. They're populist because they make sense. And people like them. So that was fascism. Rent controls are fascism, but people love them. Tenants love them. Landlords might not, but tenants do. So why not have fascism for animals and help animals? All the people who object to things, think about what people are objecting to. People generally object to things that don't benefit them. So it'll be farmers and business people who will be objecting to kind policies that are kind towards animals. Just ignore them. They're horrible. Just have a bit of humanity, and try and think of the animals' welfare. At least if we only have humane produce or UK produce, then either animals will be helped or will be helped, and the money will be kept in the country. That'll be good. Maybe it'll be spent here. At least it might be invested here, possibly. Anyway, at least we'll get to keep our animals instead of breeding them breeding them into extinction. Because if you want meat, you better be humane pretty quickly, because otherwise it will be bred until it becomes so damaged it becomes extinct. And then you really will have to go vegetarian. Yeah. So, yeah, at least support this policy. So, otherwise, you might not have any meat. Thanks for watching. Bye.